I've given you the argument for why economists like markets. It's going to maximize their total economic surplus. And then now we're going to talk about different types of market failure and deadweight loss. Market failure is going to be when supply and demand will lead to an inefficient outcome. So this is the other side of the coin, right? We had the really pro-market argument, don't mess with markets, don't gum it up, government. And this slide is talk about when markets might lead to an inefficient outcome. So this is going to be more nuanced, right? So I'm going to put on my normative hat here, where I'm going to give you my own views or opinions. And it's like, I don't take any one stand on markets are always good or markets are always bad. It's going to be a case by case basis of this is why this particular market is bad because it fails in this particular way. Of this other market, this is working great. There's no market failures. We should use markets to do that. Okay. All right. So markets can fail for a number of reasons. And so economists have come up with a list of big categories of these type of market failures. And so three of them we're actually going to cover in class or in this course. One's gonna be market power. So this is like monopolies, when you have one company that is going to have the entire market, and they can extract surplus from consumers. They can raise prices on people to do that. An externality is when you impose a cost on somebody else from a decision. The classic example we're going to go through is going to be something like pollution, where when I decide to drive a car, I put emissions into the air that's going to affect people's health, and that's a negative externality that I impose on somebody. That's going to cause a market failure, and we might be able to fix it. Right? Information problems, irrationality of consumers. These are two that could cause these market failures. They're much more complicated and need more math, so we're not going to cover them in this course. And then finally, we'll talk about government regulations. And one government regulation that we'll talk about is going to be taxes on things. And that's actually going to be in this module where we talk about taxes. Okay. All right. So these are going to be market failures when supply and demand leads to an inefficient outcome. You don't need to memorize this list. We'll go through these in the different modules that you need to know. But I wanted to give you a balanced view of market efficiency and market allocation, right? There's a really pro market argument by some economists, but there's also this other side of the coin where we need to talk about these market failures when it doesn't work. Okay. Now, more formally here, what you might have to know for the exam is going to be how do we think about underproduction and overproduction in this what's called a deadweight loss. So I'm going to show you on a supply and demand graph, like always. We have our price and our quantity, downward sloping demand curve, and upward sloping supply curve. We know that the efficient quantity is going to be where supply crosses demand. Whoops. All right. And so let's do Q star for that efficient quantity. Q star efficient quantity. So maximizes total surplus. There we go. All right. So now I want to talk about what happens is, say something just gums up the works and it causes us to either underproduce or overproduce. So that would be something like maybe there's some government regulation that's going to cause us to produce QU for under, or let's just do Q under. All right. We don't know. You don't need to know what's causing that underproduction yet. Just that it's happening. Okay. That means we're only going to sell up to that quantity, that Q under. And so for our surpluses, the total economic surplus, right, is everything below demand, above the supply curve, up until the quantity that is actually sold. And so here we're talking about up to here. Right? It's going to stop where we actually have the actual production, that Q under. Right? The point being that these units here are not being produced in that quantity. All right, so I don't want to color this in. There'll be too many colors. But if we just let supply and demand and and markets allocate things in this case, we would have this big triangle, right, in total economic surplus. But we don't because we have underproduction. So Q under relative to Q star. Right? Therefore, we're losing out on all this surplus here. Right? This surplus is gone. It would have been there if we produced Q star and sold Q star. But now it's gone. And so we're going to call that a deadweight loss. And oftentimes I'll just do DWL for deadweight loss. Okay, this is happening from lost gains from trade for those units. So that difference in units there, we would have traded them, and if we traded them, we would get some surplus, that area of triangle. And those gains from trade are now gone because we didn't sell those units. Okay. All right, so the trick is you find out what's the difference between some quantity and the efficient quantity, and then you add up the area in between demand and supply over those units. That's going to tell you your deadweight loss. Okay. All right. So this is underproduction. We could also overproduce. So we overproduce at some quantity up here. Q over. Right, we're producing too much. Q over is above our efficient quantity. We're producing too much, right? So surplus has to go down if we produce more than Q star, because we know that Q star maximizes our surplus. All right, so over on this one for overproduction, we're actually going to get this green, right, because we're selling those units. We're actually going to get this gray triangle as well, because we're selling those units when we're producing over here. It's just these extra units over here, these are the bad ones. These are the ones that are negative surplus. So I'm going to draw in one unit here for negative surplus. Right, that unit there, right? Our marginal cost supply is greater than our demand. The cost to society to produce it is greater than the benefit to society to actually consume that unit. And so that's bad. This is a negative amount. So that's subtracting out, right? And so we would have deadweight loss then for all these units when we would overproduce that gray triangle. And so this is deadweight loss from overproduction. That triangle. The triangle over here, this is deadweight loss from underproduction. And just like this deadweight loss came from lost gains from trade, these are not lost gains from trade. We don't want to do these. These are coming from wasted resources. We're wasting labor, capital, anything we need to use to produce these extra units, these overproduced units. We could go like not produce this thing and go move those workers and machines and buildings and go produce something else that people actually value more. Right? And so we're wasting all these resources by this amount here, that deadweight loss. Okay. All right, so we could have market failures, we could have government failures that would be causing either a deadweight loss from underproduction or a deadweight loss from overproduction. Okay, practice slide. You'd see a graph like this on an exam. This is going to be a market for quinoa. We got a price per bushel up there, and we have a quantity of quinoa down here. There's going to be a deadweight loss in the market for quinoa from a tax. All right, so there's going to be underproduction of quinoa with a quantity of only 4,000 bushels. All right, so we're going to model taxes next in this module, but what you need to know here is that the tax, once you tax this quinoa production, it's going to restrict a quantity down to 4,000 bushels, okay? The efficient quantity, Q star, would be where supply crosses demand. So we would be at Q star, then we would be down there with the tax, and so we would have underproduction for this line there, right? Underproduction quantity, right? And now I want you to calculate out what that deadweight loss would be. So pause here, take a few seconds to do that. All right. Area we're looking for, below demand, above supply, just for those units. That's different from the efficient quantity, right? So those 2 units there. So we need to get the area of that triangle. What's a 1/2 times base times height for the area of a triangle? Our base is going to be 6 minus 4, or 2. Our height is going to be 8 down to 4. Right? So our height's going to be 4. Right? And so this is going to put that in your calculator, and you'll get a dead weight loss equal to $4 in this case. Right, so this one was underproduction. We could do one where we have overproduction. So suppose a law pushes production and consumption of Beyond Meat burgers to be 600 units. Calculate the area of the deadweight loss using the figure below. So I want you to do the same similar type thing here, so pause for a few seconds and solve this out. Great. So the efficient output is going to be supply crosses demand, so we'll have 400. I'm telling you that we'll have overproduction up to 600. So here's our overproduction line for our quantity. And so we have these 200 units here of overproduction. And so we need to add up the area in between the supply and demand curves over that difference from the efficient output of 400. All right. We got an area here, 1/2 base times height for this triangle. Our base will be this 400 to 600. So that's going to be 600 minus 400. Our height's going to be $2 down to 50 cents. And so we'll get 1/2 times 200 times $1.50. And so we'll get 100 times $1.50 equals $150. Okay, so be able to do those both type of questions on an exam of calculating deadweight losses, either for an underproduction or overproduction. All right, there's our market failures. We could also have government failures. Okay, so the efficiency of well-functioning markets are going to point to the importance of market forces, right? And so that what that means is that let's let markets do what they can and don't gum them up. The government could come up with a number of policies that could cause a market failure, right? Rent control would be one that would be a government failure. Taxes on things, just regulations that are gumming up the works, right, would be government failures here of gumming up the works. But we do have instances of market failures. This is where the market doesn't give you efficient outcomes. We have externalities or a monopoly or those others on that list that I showed you. And we might be able to use government policies to fix the market failures. Right? The idea here being is like, oh, the markets are, you don't want to have the argument of like markets fail, so let's just not have any markets at all. Let's just go full central planning like the old Soviet Union, where bureaucrats are deciding everything. No, markets work in some cases, markets don't work in other cases. We know why markets don't work in other cases. And economists have come up with ways to actually fix those market failures. And many of those ways have to do with government policies, right? So governments might be able to fix things whenever there's a market failure. Okay. But again, sometimes government failure occurs, and so there's this trade-off here, where in my own normative view, putting on my own opinion here, it's a case-by-case basis, and you need to look at every case separately to think about, should we have government intervention or not? It's not like a one rule for everything.